Right now, EPA is finishing up its modeling of Senate climate legislation. Co-author Barbara Boxer says once that analysis is complete, her Environment Committee will hold hearings on the bill. But today, another Senate committee heard testimony about just how unreliable the modeling process can be regarding climate legislation. Clean Sky's Tyler Suiters talked to both senators and witnesses about today's testimony. So, Tyler, the hearing today was the economic impact of a climate bill, but it seems more like the focus was about trying to figure out exactly what the economic impact is going to be.
Oh, I think that's fair to say, Susan. And it's interesting because Chairman Jeff Bingaman of the Energy and Natural Resources Committee is presumably the one who called this hearing about economic impacts. But in his own opening statement, he started to slam the entire process, saying he called into question the accuracy of these things, if not the validity of these models, regarding climate-related economic analysis. So I want to read to you a statement from what he said to begin the hearing. He said models can be very useful tools, but he went on to say they are imperfect tools, however, and models have often been used or manipulated to make a predetermined point and show favorable or unfavorable results for any given policy. Again, this is from Chairman Jeff Bingaman. He goes on to say, over the course of our discussions on climate change legislation, this has been particularly true. Bingaman also pointed to interest groups and stakeholders, as he put it, circling Capitol Hill, pushing analyses both for and against a proposed cap-and-trade system. After the hearing, I talked to one of the witnesses, EIA Administrator Richard Newell, about the complications in this modeling process, and specifically, we discussed the issue of emerging technology.
There is significant uncertainty when you're looking over the course of several decades, but that doesn't mean the analysis is not useful. I mean, what it means that your analysis should look at a range of different scenarios, and hopefully with the idea of informing policy, that policy can be designed in a way that's robust against different scenarios.
Final question, is there some use in your mind in using other examples? I know Senator Bingaman brought up the EU cap-and-trade system. Senator Shaheen brought up the RGGI system, which includes her home state. Are those accurate models in your mind?
Well, there's relevant lessons that could be learned from those models, but again, I wouldn't say that the proposals in the United States are exactly like those models. In fact, there's some clear distinctions, and some of the elements of current policy design are deliberately in there as a reaction to previous examples where things might not have been designed as well as they might have been.
Now, another witness calling this entire process into question is Dr. Larry Parker. He's with the Congressional Research Service. He said his group reviewed and synthesized 7 separate studies. And he said that it's difficult, maybe even unwise, to project any costs out to 2030 or beyond. He talked about changing regulatory standards and technological breakthroughs among the variables involved here. And he said, quoting now, long-term cost projections are at best speculative, and they should be viewed with attentive skepticism. But he also said, Susan, the models can indicate, quoting now, the sensitivity of a program's provisions to varying economic, technological, and behavioral assumptions. So in other words, don't trust these models unless you trust them.
Right. Okay. So let's be clear. Let's talk about what today's testimony really was. This modeling involved the House climate bill, not the Senate bill that right now is pending. So is Waxman-Markey still causing such a rift among senators?
Well, you know, it's almost the opposite in some ways, Susan. There's some unification going on here because of the frustration over this process. Remember, it has now been 4 months since Waxman-Markey passed the House. That was back in June. And today, the committee's ranking member, Lisa Murkowski, said that, as I mentioned, Dr. Parker mentioned, there are 7 analyses and reports on this House climate legislation, Waxman-Markey. And Senator Murkowski went on to say none of those accounts for everything contained in this bill. Again, underscoring that frustration. Back to the witnesses now, and the EIA's Richard Newell said that some Waxman-Markey provisions simply are not represented in the EIA's analysis. Just some of those not included there: Clean Energy Deployment Administration language, also the Strategic Allowance Reserve, and new efficiency standards for transportation equipment. Those are just a few. But Newell did say definitively the proposed renewable electricity and energy standard would not drive new energy sources. On to this man, CBO Director Doug Elmendorf. He said the cost of reducing the extent of climate change may be significant under Waxman-Markey, but he also tackled the issue of green jobs. He said climate legislation would cause permanent shifts in production and employment. He said during the shifts, total employment would probably be reduced a little, but he went on to say that it may be mitigated over time because of adjustments with the composition of demand and different outputs as well. Finally, the EPA's Reed Harvey, you see him right there. He is chief of the Climate Economics Branch of the Office of Air and Radiation. He says EPA cost estimates are similar to those of the CBO, but, quoting him, the costs will be lower the sooner we start acting. Afterward, I talked to Bob Corker from Tennessee about the Republican doubts that are still lingering about virtually any version of a cap-and-trade plan.
I think what's happened in this bill, and I think everybody knows this, I mean, it's a scheme to hide from the public what in essence is really happening. And I just throughout life have felt that you're much better off being very transparent and direct about what you're doing. I mean, the whole purpose is to put a price on carbon. If that's the purpose, tax carbon, but lower something else. Lower some other tax, make it so there's not a net new penny coming into the federal government. But under a scheme like this, that's not what happens. And, you know, it's just a backhanded way of doing something.
Talking about the uncertainties here, it's been a big week for Doug Elmendorf of the CBO, Susan. He also testified about health care projections and cost allocations going forward. He was responding to a question from Maria Cantwell today on the Energy Committee, and he said, "Every day I am overwhelmed by the uncertainties I deal with." So again, his point is take all these analyses as guidance, but not fact.
Right. Okay. So Talia reported earlier today that Boxer said she has no Republicans yet on board with her legislation, but we do know about Senator Graham being on board with some version of that climate legislation. Any other Republicans coming on board?
Well, being on board, Susan, I think that's a fair way to put it, because he and John Kerry, of course, wrote that op-ed in the New York Times over the weekend, a column that said that the climate legislation can move forward with 5 separate caveats included in there. And Lisa Murkowski alluded to that during her opening statement today, and I'll quote now, "The framework they," that is Senators Kerry and Graham, laid out in those 1,000 words is already better than the policies it took the House 1,400 pages to impose." So, Susan, that goes back to your question about the divisiveness over Waxman-Markey that is still lingering right now. I also talked to Republican Senator Jim Risch about this. He is from Idaho, and his point about the Kerry-Graham alliance is that words are fine, but what we need to see are firm amendments that favor some Republican ideas for this bill. Anything in Kerry Boxer that you find appealing or that you may see included in the markup process that would get your vote?
Well, I think that it's very early in the process to be sorting these things out. You watched what happened with health care, and as you know, that's a Rubik's Cube, and this is a Rubik's Cube on steroids. So I would say that we're a long ways away from being able to give and take where we need to wind up with something that can pass. Obviously, I'm a strong believer in nuclear energy, and I want to see a strong nuclear component of whatever bill passes.
Again, the focus returns to Kerry Boxer tomorrow, albeit through a different committee. The Senate Foreign Relations Committee is holding a hearing. This is involving the Subcommittee on International Development and Foreign Assistance, Economic Affairs, and International Environmental Protection Subcommittee. It is a mouthful. Susan, the makeup there, remember this is John Kerry's committee, 11 Democrats, 8 Republicans, so seemingly anything that goes into that committee regarding the climate bill will pass out of it easily. 5 of the members are from energy, 5 are from environment, so we're getting a feel in terms of what some of them may want to see in this bill, how they may vote if it comes through foreign relations. Among those 2, interestingly enough, Barbara Boxer and Jim Inhofe, about as diametrically opposed as you could get, the 2 leaders of the Environment Committee. They sit on this committee as well. We'll see if they're at tomorrow's hearing, although we probably know exactly what to expect from both of them.
But still, tomorrow could be a telling day.
I think so, in terms of talking to members of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and seeing what they want. Barbara Boxer, during her comments about Kerry Boxer and the way forward late yesterday afternoon, talked about the work going on behind the scenes by her committee and also John Kerry's Foreign Relations Committee. So presumably, just as Barbara Boxer has all the Democrats lined up on Environment and Public Works to vote for this, Susan, I'd assume John Kerry is doing the very same thing with the Democrats on his committee. And again, he has the numbers with a 3-member advantage already in place. Right. So I think there's little doubt it will pass Foreign Relations. It's just a matter of whether they hold a markup and what version does pass.
Okay, we'll be watching that. Tyler Suiters, thank you.
Of course.